So again, this is as just mentioned, this is a practical use case of SQL on FHIR that we here at Flexpa have brought to production this year. This is work that was a collaboration between Larry and I. Larry's not able. Larry, I think, may be listening, but has a newborn. Coincidentally, I do too, but my newborn is a couple weeks older, so I'm going to give them a presentation today. So the problem is that if you're using an LLM, context is limited, right? So that's a basic problem of when you want to build an agent that maybe a patient can use to ask questions of, or to interrogate their health history, or to maybe find an incorrect medical billing. So at Flexpal, we built that experience. We have a Flexpal. Flexpal is our agent that helps patients understand those things about their healthcare. And so you can see on the right side of the screen a screenshot of the app where a user is asking, "Have I ever been diagnosed with a vitamin B deficiency?" And the agent goes off and searches for information that might help answer that question in the patient's record. And you can see that indicated by this little UI here. And this is very similar to apps that we've all used, like ChatGPT. The issue, though, is context is limited. So we can't put all of your health history into the conversation, at least if it's FHIR resources. FHIR resources are big, they have lots of elements. And also, agentic search is this useful new paradigm that's emerged over the last year, and I think a lot of us are now familiar with it through coding agents, where we're not actually in advance of the conversation. We're not trying to figure out what we need to put into the chat context. We're allowing the agent to determine that by giving it tools that it can use to selectively insert or find the data that's relevant to answer the query. So that's a little bit about the background. The problem more specifically that we tried to solve with SQL on FHIR is that if you use FHIR's REST API or MCP server as the tool to give to your agent, you will very quickly exhaust the context because of the fact that the FHIR resources are huge. But this is also true for coding agents. Coding agents have to help us navigate very, very large files, right? There's not really a difference between a large JavaScript file and a large FHIR resource. And in the agent context, this seems mostly to be solved. So if you've used Cursor or Claude Code recently, they can pretty capably navigate very large files and find functions and different things. And they do that with really basic but very powerful command line tools like ls and grep. So that's the problem. Really quickly, I've been saying tools and agents, and that kind of sounds like gobbledygook. Like, what am I talking about here? If you've never done this, this is a 30-second lightning version of what I'm talking about. If you use an LLM API, so if you talk to an LLM, you can send it plain text. So you can send it a message and it will send you a response. But you can also, in all of the popular APIs like Anthropic or OpenAI's API, you can also give the LLM a list of tools. And when the tool is just a function, and when the LLM wants to use a particular tool, it will tell you, you run the code that it wants to use, and you tell it the result. So it's basically a game of passing between you and the LLM some state about function calls, and the function call result, whatever the result of that function call, that is now available to the LLM. So a simple example would be asking an LLM, "What's the weather today?" and providing it a function that says, "Get current weather." And the LLM would be able to say, "Hey, I want to call that function." You give it back the result, and then it says, "Well, the weather's really nice today." That was really fast. This is another view of this problem. Now that we have great LLM tools, image tools, we can create really cool custom diagrams. So here's a custom diagram of what I'm talking about. We've got a bunch of FHIR resources. We've got observations, encounters, medication requests in the context window, and we just can't fit it all in. Right? We have to do something with the FHIR resources before we provide it to the LLM context. And we can see this sort of illustration of the tool call, the LLM deciding to use the FHIR server, grabbing the resources, but then sort of tripping over itself. Hey, I just have too much data here. I can't process it. Bunch of possible solutions built into FHIR. There's more. You could use summary, you could use underscore elements. Of course, you could do manual transforms. Those all have a bunch of disadvantages. For example, for summary, you actually don't get to choose which elements that you're making, that you're selecting. If you use underscore elements, you can only select the base elements. Manual transforms are really messy. FHIR is a deeply nested data schema. Of course, you can write some scripts that parse out just the pieces that you want, but like that's why SQL on FHIR exists in the first place, right? We want a projection of a FHIR resource into a flat format. So that's what we used. And basically, all we do is provide the LLM with a tool that allows it to execute a view definition and return the result instead of returning the FHIR resource. So pretty simple, pretty simple implementation, pretty simple idea. I'll quickly talk through this in practice about how this works at a code level. So this screenshot, we're looking at an example of the part of the code that you would need to create when you are handling the tool or function call from the LLM. So you tell the LLM, here's a tool. It's a tool that allows you in this example to search for someone's claims. So to search through their claims history. Okay, when the LLM says, I want to search through the claims history, we execute this code. What does the code do? Well, it gets some FHIR resources. Okay, it filters them for a date range potentially, and then it passes a view definition and a list of those resources to our SQL on FHIR view runner, and it just returns it. So a pretty simple function. This is the view definition. So we're parsing out, in this example, the diagnosis codes, procedure codes, service codes, total submitted, and total benefit from an EOB or a claim. And this is just really useful if you are trying to interact with someone's medical claim history. Like you really want to know the basics. You want to know when it was billed, were there any diagnostic codes or procedure codes included? What was the total? What did it actually cost? And what did the patient pay? So this is domain, whatever really matters for the context in which you'd be using this, that might be agent specific. Of course, you have to be sensitive to that, but you can take that view definition, and then instead of providing a giant FHIR resource or list of FHIR resources in raw format to the LLM, you can just provide this. So flat, nice result. You can contact me on X or LinkedIn or on email. By these means, I'll post the slides here. And we also have a blog post that sort of unpacks this in a little bit more detail than I have time for in the lightning talk format. But we have had a lot of success in applying some pretty basic ideas here really successfully, and they have dramatically improved the performance we can get out of these sort of agentic or conversational AI tools using FHIR as a source format.